Antigone maybe didn't think through all the implications of her decision. I'm going to lose my guy over this, not just my life, but my guy. There's ripple effects to the things that she's doing. All right, let's listen to the ode really quickly. The chorus is Song of Love. Take a look at it.
Exit Creon. Ode 3, Strophe.
844.
Love, unconquerable waster of rich men, keeper of warm lights and all-night vigil in the soft face of a girl, sea wanderer, forest visitor. Even the pure immortals cannot escape you, and mortal man, in his one day's dusk, trembles before your glory.
845.
Antistrophe.
Surely you swerve upon ruin the just man's consenting heart, as here you have made bright anger strike between father and son, and none has conquered but love. A girl's glance working the will of heaven, pleasure to her alone who mocks us, merciless Aphrodite.
Now, of course, for the Greeks, let's put this in our notes at 3a. The mention of Aphrodite immediately takes us to the Troy tale and, of course, to the judgment of Paris. You'll remember that whole thing about the Trojan War all gets started because Aphrodite is the one who gets picked by Paris to give her the apple that says to the most beautiful, leaving Hera and Athena, of course, upset, and Troy is going to fall. So the mention of Aphrodite here is intentional by Sophocles, no doubt about it. And yet, let's think about this. This little ode says, all that we've been watching transpired because of love. Let's list the different loves. Love of a brother, of a sister towards a brother, Antigone towards her brother, Polynices. Love between sister and sister, between Antigone and Ismene, or the lack of it. Ismene will, of course, say she loves Antigone. Antigone has serious problems with Ismene. Love between a father and a son. Obviously, love between the two lovers, Antigone and Haemon. All of these are blamed on love, which begs a question. Let's ask it now at 3b. Is love a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is it positive or is it destructive? At 3a, write this one down. Do you remember in Romeo and Juliet, when we meet Romeo for the very first time, he talks about love and the paradoxical nature of love. On the one hand, it's incredible. It's like a fire that gives you light. But on the other hand, it's like a fire that can burn you down, blow you up, whatever. All right, now we turn to scene 4. Let's go to it on 845. In scene 4, we're going to have now Antigone, and she is being led away to go and starve to death slowly in her cave. She is not going to be stoned to death. She's going to die of starvation. And as she gets ready to go, she's very somber. Let's put this in our notes. She's quite different from the Antigone of earlier in the play. So defiant. So, yeah, I did it. What do you want to say about it? So she's not so Promethean anymore. Maybe the hard fact of her imminent death is settling in on her, and it's creating a certain kind of difference in mood and emotion for her. Let's pay attention now. Watch how this one unfolds.
Scene 4. As Antigone enters guarded.
But I can no longer stand in awe of this, nor seeing what I see, keep back my tears. Here is Antigone, passing to that chamber where all find sleep at last.
Strophe 1.
Look upon me, friends, and pity me, turning back at the night's edge to say goodbye to the sun that shines for me no longer. Now sleepy death summons me down to Acheron, that cold shore. There is no bride song there, nor any music.
Yet not unpraised, not without a kind of honor, you walk at last into the underworld, untouched by sickness, broken by no sword. What woman has ever found your way to death?
Antistrophe 1.
How often I have heard the story of Niobe, Tantalus' wretched daughter, how the stone clung fast about her, ivy close, and they say, the rain falls endlessly in sifting soft snow, her tears are never done. I feel the loneliness of her death in mine.
But she was born of heaven, and you are woman, woman born. If her death is yours, a mortal woman's, is this not for you glory in our world and in the world beyond?
Strophe 2.
You laugh at me. Ah, friends, friends, can you not wait until I am dead? O Thebes, O men, many charioted in love with fortune, dear springs of Dirce, sacred Theban grove, be witnesses for me, denied all
846,
pity,
846.
unjustly judged, and think a word of love for her whose path turns under dark earth, where there are no more tears.
You have passed beyond human daring, and come at last into a place of stone where justice sits. I cannot tell what shape of your father's guilt appears in this.
Antistrophe 2.
You have touched it at last, the bridal bed unspeakable, horror of son and mother mingling. Their crime, infection of all our family. O Oedipus, father and brother, your marriage strikes from the grave to murder mine. I have been a stranger here in my own land all my life. The blasphemy of my birth has followed me.
Reverence is a virtue, but strength lives in established law. That must prevail. You have made your choice. Your death is the doing of your conscious hand.
Epode.
Then let me go, since all your words are bitter, and the very light of the sun is cold to me. Lead me to my vigil, where I must have neither love nor lamentation, no song, but silence.
Well, pause for a moment and just point out. Notice there's an exchange here between Antigone and the chorus, where the chorus says fundamentally, hey, you chose this, honey. You said that you knew you were going to die, and guess what? You are going to die. And guess what? That's exactly the way it should be. And then a mention of her father leads her to begin to think, you know what? It's true. My father had this terrible thing that happened to him, Oedipus. He kills his dad, he marries his mom. It's horrific, and I'm the product of that. I've had to live with that all my life. How embarrassing, how shameful. This is that notion that families have curses of a kind. That takes us back to a text that we messed around with earlier in our time together, Monkey's Paw. You'll remember that idea that there is this curse that seems to be upon somehow a family, and there's no way to get out of it. In other words, let's put it at 2a really quickly for a major message here. One major message for this passage is families seem to hand on certain kinds of joys, but also sufferings, pain. And she admits it. Notice, the chorus will come back and say on page 846, your death is the doing of your conscious hand. You chose this, and therefore you're getting what you wanted. You're the one that said you were willing to die. Notice she mentioned that it was love that led her to do this. We might say passion. We might say love. We might say respect for the laws of God. Creon shows up. And Creon now is going to almost like taunt Antigone. Watch this.
Creon interrupts impatiently.
If dirges and planned lamentations could put off death, men would be singing forever.
To the servants.
Take her, go. You know your orders. Take her to the vault and leave her alone there. And if she lives or dies, that's her affair, not ours. Our hands are clean.
O tomb, vaulted bride bed in eternal rock, soon I shall be with my own again, where Persephone welcomes the thin ghost underground. And I shall see my father again, and you, mother, and dearest Polynices, dearest indeed to me, since it was my hand that washed him clean and poured the ritual wine. And my reward is death before my time. And yet, as men's hearts know, I have done no wrong. I have not sinned before God, or if I have, I shall know the truth in death. But if the guilt lies upon Creon who judged me, then I pray, may his punishment equal my own.
O passionate heart, unyielding, tormented still by the same winds.
Our guards shall have good cause to regret their delaying.
Ah, that voice is like the voice of death.
I can give you no reason to think you are mistaken.
Thebes, and you my father's gods, and rulers of Thebes. You see me now, the last unhappy daughter of a line of kings, your kings led away to death. You will remember what things I suffer, and at what men's hands, because I would not transgress the laws of heaven.
To the guards, simply.
Come, let us wait no longer.
Exit Antigone, left, guarded. Ode 4.
All right, let's pause for a second before we get to Ode 4. And let's just make some quick observations about last words of Antigone. So write this down. This will be Antigone's last words. You can already, I'll ask this question at 3a for you, and then we'll come back to it at 3a. What's the text for you where you have those last words right before the hero of the text is going to go get jacked, going to die, going to go off to fight? It might work for you even in video games, where right before a single final moment, you have a certain kind of moment of talking or, explaining this is what has to go down. By the way, let's point out, the word alone keeps getting used. Antigone is alone. She has nobody to take care of her. Her father, dead. Her mother, hanged herself. Her brothers, dead. Ismene, fled. She's all alone. Her guy, Haman, gone. Antigone is a symbol. Put this at 2b. Antigone is not just a symbol of the Promethean, don't tell me what to do. Antigone is a symbol of loneliness, isolation, alienation. And here she is all by herself. But then she takes some comfort on the notion that as soon as she's dead, she gets to go into the underworld where she gets to see all of her family members when she gets down there. But then notice, she says it, I've done no wrong. Right up to the very end, she is willing to say, what I did, totally legit. I have done nothing wrong, and you guys all know it. Speaking, of course. My punishment, she says, may Creon's punishment equal my own. In other words, may he get his. Let's go ahead and put this in your notes at 2b. That's an example of foreshadowing. We know that Creon in the end is going to have something horrific happen to him. These last words, by the way, put them at 3a. When you're seniors, we're going to study the famous Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf. And at the end of that text, we're going to have the great hero Beowulf, who will, in fact, have to come to terms with the fact that he is soon to die. And his last words will also be significant, just like hers are. She says it, though, at line 81. You will remember what things I suffer, and at what men's hands, because I would not transgress the laws of heaven. This is, of course, Sophocles' way to say as well about this play. This play is going to be remembered long after I've lived and died. And, of course, it did become remembered long afterwards as the play about the question, is it the right thing to do to break the law if the law is unjust? And therefore, Antigone should be celebrated and remembered. Of course, at the very now end of our play, we've got to have that end game, the resolution. We'll turn now to Ode 4 on 848, and the chorus is going to talk at length about the bad things that have happened in Greek mythology when people don't pay attention to the gods and the God's will. Let's go ahead and just listen to this. It's beautiful poetry, and we'll stop at the end of Ode 4.
Strophe 1.
All Danae's beauty was locked away in a brazen cell where the sunlight could not come. A small room, still as any grave, enclosed her. Yet she was a princess too, and Zeus in a rain of gold poured love upon her. O child, child, no power in wealth or war or tough sea-blackened ships can prevail against untiring destiny.
Antistrophe 1.
And Dryas' son also, that furious king, bore the gods' prisoning anger for his pride. Sealed up by Dionysus in deaf stone, his madness died among echoes. So at the last he learned what dreadful power his tongue had mocked. For he had profaned the revels, and fired the wrath of the 9 implacable sisters that loved the sound of the flute.
Strophe 2.
And old men tell a half-remembered tale of horror done where a dark ledge splits the sea, and a double surf beats on the gray shores. How a king's new woman, sick with hatred for the queen he had imprisoned, ripped out his 2 sons' eyes with her bloody hands, while grinning Ares watched the shuttle plunge 4 times, 4 blind wounds crying for revenge.
Antistrophe 2.
Crying tears and blood mingled, piteously born, those sons whose mother was of heavenly birth. Her father was the god of the north wind, and she was cradled by gales. She raced with young colts on the glittering hills, and walked untrammeled in the open light. But in her marriage deathless fate found means to build a tomb like yours for all her joy.
All right, let's pause. Can I make a quick observation, by the way? There's more to this play than we are reading. These choral odes and the like are actually much longer than what's being presented here for you. And if you want, you can go on online and you can read the entire set of comments. But let's just point out really quickly. The chorus begins with the Hall of Shame. The Hall of Shame. Namely, people who defied the gods and ended up getting jacked for it. Notice on 848, your sidebar, Danae was imprisoned when it was foretold that she would mother a son who would kill her father, King Acrisius. Her beauty attracted Zeus, who visited her in the form of a shower of gold. Perseus was born of the union, and Danae was exiled with the child. Years later, as prophesied, the boy did kill Acrisius, whom he failed to recognize as his grandfather. And Darius' son Lycoris, whose opposition to the worship of Dionysius was severely punished by the gods. He drove the followers of Dionysius from Thrace and was driven insane. Lycoris recovered from his madness while imprisoned in a cave, but he was later blinded by Zeus as additional punishment. In other words, put it in your notes this way. We sometimes forget that this play is in fact a religious play, and that Sophocles is teaching his audience, if you defy the will of the gods, punishment and suffering. No question about it. Now, let's remind ourselves at 3a that it was Gautama Buddha who woke up from under his Bodhi tree after his enlightenment. And the first thing that he said was what? Life is suffering. That's what life is. Painful. Suffering. Here, Sophocles seems to be suggesting that humans are caused to have pain and suffering because they don't follow or obey the will of the gods. Now, the question is always, are we talking about specifically Antigone? Are we talking about Creon? Who is it that has to pay the price? Of course, at 3a as well, we can mention, as we love to mention, our Longfellow's poem, Psalm of Life. And the idea that life is not just about the suffering, but life is as well about being a hero in the strife, trying to find some way. Remember those lines? Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury the dead. Act in the living present. Heart within and God o'erhead. Obviously, an idea presented here. All of this religious language, now we're ready to move on to scene 5. All of this religious language leads us to Tiresias. Let's pause now. Let's turn to page 849 and let's take some good notes on Tiresias. Now, of course, we saw Tiresias in our freshman year. Let's put it in our notes. Tiresias was the blind prophet, yes, that Odysseus wants to see when he goes down into the underworld, yes? And down there, it's Tiresias who tells Odysseus, you're going to have some serious challenges going home. Who is this Tiresias? 2 things. 1, he has memories of the past. So he knows the past. He has lived both the life of a man and a woman, and he's remembered those lives. So he has the knowledge that most humans don't have. Women don't know what men think and feel. Men don't know what women think and feel. Tiresias has lived both lives and can remember them, and therefore, he knows things about the past. 2, Tiresias knows the future. He can predict the future. He does this often by looking at the omens, like looking at bird guts. So they would put a bird on an altar and cut it open and study, for example, the liver of the bird to see how the future is going to unfold. It will be Tiresias now who shows up and will have an exchange with Creon, and in a line, he will say it, Creon, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. And Creon, of course, and Tiresias are going to have an interesting exchange. All right, let's go to work. Sit up and really concentrate now. Try and conquer monkey mind. Watch this exchange now between Tiresias and Creon. It's quite fascinating.
Scene 5. Enter blind Tiresias. led by a
849.
boy. The opening speeches of Tiresias should be in sing-song contrast to the realistic lines of Creon.
This is the way the blind man comes. Princes, princes, lockstep, two heads lit by the eyes of one.
What new thing have you to tell us, old Tiresias?
I have much to tell you. Listen to the prophet Creon.
I'm not aware that I have ever failed to listen.
Then you have done wisely, king, and ruled well.
I admit my debt to you, but what have you to say?
This, Creon, you stand once more on the edge of fate.
What do you mean? Your words are a kind of dread.
Listen, Creon. I was sitting in my chair of augury at the place where the birds gather about me. They were all a chatter, as is their habit, when suddenly I heard a strange note in that jangling, a scream, a whirring fury.
Bad signs.
I knew that they were fighting, tearing each other, dying in a whirlwind of wings clashing, and I was afraid. I began the rites of burnt offering at the altar, but Hephaestus failed me. Instead of bright flame, there was only the sputtering slime of the fat thigh flesh melting.
850.
The entrails dissolved in gray smoke. The bare bone burst from the welter, and no blaze. This was a sign from heaven. My boy described it, seeing for me as I see for others. I tell you, Creon, you yourself have brought this new calamity upon us. Our hearths and altars are